The dying sun painted the Montana territory in shades of copper and gold as Clara Bennett stumbled through the saloon doors of Redemption Creek, her threadbare dress clinging to her trembling frame. 3 days without food had left her hollow-eyed and desperate, clutching the only thing of value she possessed, her mother's silver locket. The bartender barely glanced up as she approached, her pride warring with the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. "Please," she whispered, placing the locket on the scarred wooden bar. "I'll trade this for a meal. Anything." Before I continue with Clara's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Where are you listening from today? Please let us know in the comments. The bartender picked up the locket with grease-stained fingers, squinting at it dismissively. "Silver-plated junk, worth maybe a stale biscuit." "That's enough." The voice came from behind her, deep, steady, carrying the kind of authority that made men straighten their spines. Clara turned to find herself staring at the broadest chest she'd ever seen, clothed in a dust-covered work shirt that strained against powerful shoulders. Her gaze traveled upward to meet eyes the color of storm clouds, set in a face weathered by sun and wind, but somehow still handsome, framed by dark hair that touched his collar. "This woman needs a proper meal, Marcus. Put it on my account," the stranger said, his attention never leaving Clara's face. "And give her back that locket. Some things aren't meant to be traded." Marcus grumbled but complied. The stranger gestured to a corner table, and Clara found herself following on unsteady legs, too exhausted to argue. Within minutes, a plate of beef stew and fresh bread appeared, and she had to force herself not to devour it like a starving animal. "Name's Nathaniel Cross," he said, leaning back in his chair with casual confidence. "I run the Double Creek Ranch, 10 miles north of here. You got a name? Or should I just keep calling you Desperate Stranger?" Clara swallowed a mouthful of bread, meeting his eyes with as much dignity as she could muster. "Clara Bennett. And I'll pay you back for this meal, Mr. Cross. I don't accept charity." "Didn't figure you for the type who did." A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "But you look like you've been running from something, or someone." Her hands stilled on the spoon. How did he know? But then, she supposed desperation wore a familiar face in these territories. "My husband died 6 months ago. His brother decided the ranch should go to him, and that I should go with it, whether I wanted to or not." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Did he hurt you?" He tried. Clara lifted her chin, a spark of defiance breaking through her exhaustion. "I waited until he was drunk, took his horse, and rode for 3 days straight. Haven't eaten since I left." "Where were you headed?" "Anywhere that wasn't there." Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes seeming to see straight through to her bones. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I've got a proposition for you, Miss Bennett. My ranch hands are all men, rough types who can handle cattle and mend fences, but can't cook worth a damn. My housekeeper left last month to live with her daughter in San Francisco. I need someone to manage the household, prepare meals, keep things running smooth. Room, board, and $30 a month. Interested?" Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. It sounded too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good usually came with hidden costs. "Why would you offer this to a complete stranger?" "Because I recognize someone who's fighting to survive," he said simply. "And because I'm a practical man who needs help running a ranch. This isn't charity, Miss Bennett. It's employment." She wanted to trust him. God, how she wanted to trust that calm, certain voice. But trust had nearly destroyed her once before. "I'll work hard, Mr. Cross, but I need your word, your absolute word, that this is only about employment, nothing more. You have it." He extended his hand across the table, large and calloused and steady. "I'm not a man who breaks his promises." Clara placed her smaller hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. Something flickered between them. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. She pulled her hand back quickly, unsettled by the sensation. "Good. Finish your meal. We'll leave at first light." The Double Creek Ranch sprawled across a valley framed by purple mountains, with a main house built from honey-colored timber and stone. Clara had expected something rough and utilitarian, but Nathaniel's home possessed an unexpected grace. Wide windows catching the morning light, a wraparound porch with hand-carved railings, flower boxes that had gone wild with neglect, but still held traces of someone's careful planning. "My mother's touch," Nathaniel said, noticing her gaze. "She died 5 years ago. My father followed her 6 months later. Couldn't stand to live without her, I suppose." There was pain in his voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Clara understood that particular flavor of grief, the kind that changed the landscape of your heart forever. He showed her through the house, a spacious kitchen with a cast-iron stove and a hand-pump sink, a pantry stocked with basics but lacking organization, a sitting room with comfortable furniture covered in dust sheets. Her room overlooked the eastern pastures, simply furnished but clean, with a real bed and a quilt in a star pattern. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Far more than I expected. Expected a bunkhouse and a cot?" A trace of humor warmed his expression. "I told you, Miss Bennett, this is a household position, not ranch hand work. Though if you're willing to learn riding and shooting, I'd recommend it. Territory can be dangerous for those who can't defend themselves." Over the following weeks, Clara discovered Nathaniel Cross was a man of extraordinary contradictions. He could gentle a spooked horse with infinite patience, then turn around and face down 3 drunk ranch hands ready to brawl, with nothing but his presence and a few quiet words. He worked alongside his men from sunrise to sunset, expecting no less from himself than he demanded of others. And true to his word, he treated her with complete professional respect, which somehow made her hyper-aware of every accidental brush of hands. Every moment their eyes met across the dinner table. The ranch hands, a gruff crew of 8 men, ranging from weathered veterans to eager young cowboys, accepted her with surprising warmth once they tasted her cooking. She'd worried they might resent a woman's presence, but after her first batch of sourdough biscuits and a beef roast that had them groaning with pleasure, she became Miss Clara, spoken with genuine affection. "You've got them eating out of your hand," Nathaniel observed one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. He'd taken to spending these quiet hours with her, ostensibly to discuss household matters, but increasingly just to talk. Old Joe actually washed his face before dinner tonight. First time in recorded history. Clara laughed, the sound still unfamiliar to her own ears after months of fear and silence. They're good men. Rough around the edges, but good. Like their boss? There was a teasing note in his question, but something deeper underneath. She glanced at him sideways, taking in his profile against the twilight. Strong nose, firm jaw, the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun. You're different than I expected, Mr. Cross. Nathaniel, he corrected gently. And different how? Kinder. Most men with your power would. She trailed off, old fears surfacing. Would what? Force their will? Demand what they had no right to? His voice had gone hard. That's not strength, Clara. That's weakness dressed up in cruelty. The use of her first name sent warmth through her chest. You really believe that? I do. He turned to face her fully, those gray eyes intense in the fading light. You're not property. You're a person with your own mind, your own heart, your own right to choose. Any man who doesn't understand that doesn't deserve to call himself a man. Clara's breath caught. She'd heard pretty words before, promises that dissolved like morning mist. But Nathaniel spoke with such quiet conviction that she found herself believing him despite every protective wall she'd built. Tell me something true about yourself, she said impulsively. Something you don't share with just anyone. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the last light bleed from the sky. I was engaged once, 6 years ago. Sarah was her name, sweet girl from town, daughter of the general store owner. She died of fever 3 weeks before our wedding. I thought I'd never feel that way about anyone again. Figured I'd just work the ranch, live a simple life, die alone someday. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. Losing someone you love, it changes you, makes you afraid to risk that pain again. Is that why you're afraid of me? His question was gentle, but direct. Not of me hurting you physically. I know you've moved past that worry. But afraid of something else? Yes, she admitted, the word barely a whisper. My marriage wasn't. Thomas was never cruel, but he was absent. Emotionally, I mean. He married me because he needed a wife to run his household. And I married him because I was young and foolish and thought that was enough. When he died, I felt guilty because mostly I just felt relieved. And then his brother. She shuddered. Nathaniel's hand moved toward hers on the porch railing, then stopped, hovering in the space between them. May I? She nodded, and his fingers closed over hers, warm, strong, careful. You don't have to feel guilty for surviving, Clara, or for wanting more than just survival. That night, lying in her comfortable bed, with the sound of crickets drifting through the open window, Clara acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Nathaniel Cross, and that terrified her more than her brother-in-law ever had. The morning started with one of the ranch hands, a young cowboy named Danny, galloping into the yard with his horse lathered and his face white with panic. Clara had been feeding the chickens, but she dropped the bucket and ran toward the house as Nathaniel emerged, still buttoning his shirt. Boss, it's the south fence line. Someone tore it down during the night. At least 40 head of cattle are missing, maybe more. Nathaniel's expression hardened instantly, transforming from the gentle man Clara knew to someone focused and dangerous. Rustlers or strays? Rustlers, sir. Found boot prints and evidence of a camp. They herded them out deliberate-like. How many men? Tracks suggest at least 5, maybe 6. Nathaniel turned to shout orders, his voice carrying across the yard. Within minutes, 6 armed men were mounted and ready to ride. He paused at the porch steps where Clara stood, worry evident on her face. Stay in the house, he said firmly. Keep the rifle I showed you loaded and near. If anyone comes that you don't recognize, you shoot first and ask questions after. Understood? Be careful, she said, hating how her voice shook. "Please, Nathaniel." Something flickered in his eyes at her use of his name, at the genuine fear in her tone. He reached up, his hand cupping her cheek, for just a moment, the first truly intimate touch between them. "I'll come back, I promise." Then he was gone, the thunder of hooves fading into the morning haze. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Clara threw herself into work, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, baking bread they didn't need, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling into dark possibilities. The two ranch hands left behind to guard the property tried to reassure her, but she could see the tension in their own shoulders. It was nearly sunset when she heard horses returning. Clara ran out onto the porch, her heart in her throat, counting the riders. 6 going out, only 5 coming back. "Where's Nathaniel?" she demanded as old Joe dismounted, his weathered face grim. "He's coming, Miss Clara, but he's hurt. Took a bullet to the shoulder during the fight. We got the cattle back, and the sheriff has the rustlers in custody, but the boss needs tending." 2 riders appeared on the horizon, one supporting the other. Clara watched as Danny helped Nathaniel down from his horse, his left arm hanging useless, his shirt soaked with blood. Without thinking, she ran to him, ducking under his good arm to help support his weight. "I'm all right," he gritted out, but his face was pale beneath the tan. "Looks worse than it is." "Shut up and let me help you," Clara commanded, her nurse's instincts taking over. She'd tended Thomas during his final illness and had learned basic wound care from necessity. "Get him inside. Someone fetch hot water and clean cloths." She guided Nathaniel to his bedroom, a space she'd cleaned but never entered while he was present. It was masculine and spare, heavy furniture, simple quilts, no unnecessary decoration except for a single photograph on the dresser of a younger Nathaniel with an older couple, who must have been his parents. "I need to cut away your shirt," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady as she reached for the scissors from her sewing kit. "Do what you need to do." His voice was tight with pain. The shirt fell away, revealing a chest and shoulders muscled from years of hard labor, marred now by blood and an angry wound where the bullet had torn through the meat of his shoulder. Clara's hands trembled as she cleaned the area, but her touch remained gentle. "Bullet went clean through," she observed, relief flooding her. "That's good. Means no digging around for it. But this is going to hurt when I pour the whiskey on to clean it." "Can't hurt worse than getting shot," he said, attempting a smile that came out more like a grimace. "Don't be so sure." She poured the alcohol over the wound, and his entire body went rigid, a hiss escaping between clenched teeth. His good hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, but I have to make sure it's clean." "I know." His grip gentled, but didn't release her. "Just give me a moment." She used that moment to really look at him, at the lines of pain bracketing his mouth, the vulnerability that injury had carved into his usually confident features. He'd risked his life today for cattle, for property, but she understood it was more than that. This ranch was his legacy, his parents' dream, the thing that gave his life meaning after loss had tried to hollow him out. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly as she began bandaging the wound. "Risk your life for some cows?" "They weren't just cows," he said. "They were mine. Mine to protect. Like—" He stopped, his gray eyes finding hers. "Like you're under my protection now. I don't let people take what's mine." "I'm not yours, Nathaniel." But the protest was weak, and they both knew it. "Aren't you?" His good hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "Because it sure feels like I'm yours," Has for weeks now. Clara's breath caught. She should pull away. Should maintain the safe distance between employer and employee. Should protect her scarred heart from another potential devastation. But his touch felt like home, and his eyes held such raw honesty that she couldn't force the words of denial past her lips. "This is dangerous," she whispered instead. "I know. I'm broken, Nathaniel. My marriage broke something in me. And then what happened after?" "You're not broken." His voice was fierce, despite his weakened state. "You're wounded. There's a difference. Wounded things can heal." "Can they?" Tears pricked her eyes. "Can I?" "Let me help you find out." His hand slid into her hair, drawing her closer. "Clara, I swore after Sarah died that I'd never let myself feel this way again. Too painful, too risky. But then you walked into that saloon, looking like courage wrapped in desperation. And something in me just knew." "Knew what?" "That you were worth the risk. Worth every terrifying moment of letting someone matter again." He tugged her gently closer, until their foreheads nearly touched. "I see you, Clara Bennett. Not what happened to you. Not what you've survived. Though God knows your strength amazes me. I see the woman who laughs at old Joe's terrible jokes, who leaves wildflowers on my mother's grave without being asked, who works until her hands are raw because she's determined to earn her place. That woman, you." A sob broke from Clara's throat, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, asking permission, then deeper as she responded with all the longing she'd been suppressing. His kiss tasted like whiskey and pain and promise, and she poured herself into it, letting herself feel for the first time in years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel winced as the movement pulled his injury. "Sorry," Clara said, guilt flooding her. "You're hurt, and don't apologize for that." His voice was rough, his eyes dark with desire and something deeper. "That's the best medicine I've gotten all day." She laughed despite herself, then carefully finished bandaging his shoulder. "You need rest, and I need to make you some broth. You've lost blood." "Stay with me," he said as she started to rise. "Please, just stay." So she did, settling carefully on the edge of his bed, her hand in his. They talked through the evening, about his parents, about her childhood in Ohio, about dreams they'd set aside and ones they might still reach for. And when exhaustion finally claimed him, Clara remained, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, marveling at how completely this impossible man had dismantled her defenses. The next few days passed in a haze of careful nursing and growing intimacy. Clara changed Nathaniel's bandages twice daily, her touch becoming increasingly familiar with the landscape of his body. He, in turn, insisted on teaching her to shoot properly once he could stand without swaying. If rustlers came once, they might come again, he reasoned, standing behind her in the yard, his good arm reaching around to adjust her grip on the rifle. "And I won't always be here to protect you." The feel of his body against her back, solid and warm despite the cooling autumn air, made concentration difficult. But she forced herself to focus, sighting down the barrel at the row of bottles set up on the fence. "Breathe out slowly," he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. There you go." The rifle cracked, and the center bottle exploded. Clara whooped in triumph, spinning in the circle of his arm to find him grinning down at her. "Natural talent," he said. "A few more weeks of practice and you'll outshoot half my men." "Only half?" She arched an eyebrow in challenge. "Don't get cocky." But his eyes were warm with pride and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Nathaniel's hand came up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her neck. "Clara," he said, his voice dropping to that rough timbre that did dangerous things to her composure. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you. Hell, I might already be there." His thumb traced her jawline, his touch reverent. "And I know it's too soon, and you've got healing still to do, but I need you to know. You don't have to say anything back. I needed you to know." Her heart felt too large for her chest, swelling with emotions she'd thought herself incapable of feeling. "Nathaniel," a shout from the barn interrupted them. "Us, Ryder coming in fast!" Nathaniel's expression shifted instantly to alertness. He moved toward the house, Clara following close behind. A lone horseman thundered into the yard, sliding his mount to a dramatic stop. Sheriff Morrison, looking grim. "Cross, Miss Bennett." He tipped his hat to Clara. "Thought you should know. Marcus Hayes broke out of jail last night. Killed my deputy in the process." Clara's blood turned to ice. Marcus Hayes, her brother-in-law, the man she'd fled. "Hal had help from the outside. We think he's headed this way." Morrison's weathered face was apologetic. He was heard saying he'd make you pay for the humiliation of having to chase you. "I've got a posse forming, but I wanted to warn you first." Nathaniel's jaw clenched, and Clara saw the warrior emerge beneath the gentle rancher. "Thank you, Sheriff. We'll be ready." After Morrison left, Nathaniel turned to Clara, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You need to leave. Tonight. I'll have Danny escort you to Denver. You can catch a train east, start over somewhere Hayes can't find you." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "I'm done running, Nathaniel." "Clara, this isn't about pride." "It's not about pride." She pulled away, frustration and fear warring in her chest. "It's about choosing. For once in my life, I want to choose. And I choose to stay and fight. You could die. So could you." She whirled on him, eyes blazing. "You think I could live with myself if I ran away and left you to face him alone? You think I could build some safe little life somewhere else, always wondering if you were alive or dead?" His expression softened, even as worry remained etched in every line. "You care that much? I love you, you impossible man." The admission burst from her like a physical force. "I love you, and I'm terrified of it, and I'm not leaving." For a moment, Nathaniel just stared at her. Then he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulling her against him with his good arm. "Say it again." "I love you." Again. "I love you, Nathaniel Cross." She gripped his shirt, feeling his heart thunder against her palms. "And we're going to survive this together. You should be inside," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I will be, soon." She turned to him, memorizing his face in the twilight. "If something happens, don't. If something happens," she continued firmly, "I need you to know that these months here with you have given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The belief that life could be more than just survival." Nathaniel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "Nothing's going to happen. We're going to get through this, and then I'm going to marry you properly, with a church and a preacher, and a celebration that this territory will remember for years." "That's quite a promise, Mr. Cross." "I'm a man who keeps his promises." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "You've become my heart, Clara, and I protect what's mine." The attack came an hour before dawn, when darkness was deepest, but the first birds had begun their pre-dawn chorus. Clara heard the first gunshot and was instantly alert, grabbing the rifle Nathaniel had positioned beside her bed. She ran to the window, seeing shadows moving near the barn. 6 of them, she heard old Joe shout from his position, "Coming from the east and south!" Gunfire erupted, the flashes lighting the yard like deadly fireflies. Clara spotted a figure trying to flank the house and aimed carefully, remembering Nathaniel's lessons. Breathe out. Squeeze. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and the figure went down. Good shot, Danny called from somewhere below. The battle seemed to last forever and no time at all. Clara lost count of the shots she fired, focused entirely on protecting the men she'd come to care for, protecting this place that had become home. She saw Nathaniel moving through the chaos like an avenging angel, despite his injured shoulder, taking down attackers with cold precision. Then she saw him, Marcus Hayes, larger than she remembered, meaner looking in the dim light. He'd circled around to the back of the house, clearly intending to enter through the kitchen. Clara's heart seized. If he got inside, she didn't think, just moved. Down the stairs, through the house, bursting into the kitchen just as Hayes kicked in the door. His piggy eyes found her instantly, and his cruel mouth twisted into a smile. "There you are, you ungrateful." Clara fired. The bullet caught him in the leg, and he went down with a howl of rage. Before she could fire again, he'd lunged forward, knocking the rifle from her hands. His weight slammed into her, driving her backward into the table. "Thought you could run?" he snarled, his hands closing around her throat. "Thought you could embarrass me, make me look like a fool?" Black spots danced in Clara's vision. She clawed at his hands, kicked desperately, but he was so much stronger. Her vision began to tunnel, and she thought wildly that she'd survived so much, only to die like this, in the home where she'd finally found happiness. Then Hayes's weight was gone, ripped away by a force like a locomotive. Through her blurred vision, Clara saw Nathaniel, his face transformed by pure rage, slam Hayes into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. His good hand was around Hayes's throat, and there was murder in his gray eyes. "You don't touch her." Each word punctuated with violence. Hayes tried to fight back, but he was no match for Nathaniel's fury. Clara struggled to her feet, her throat on fire, and staggered forward. "Nathaniel," she croaked. "Stop. He's not worth it." For a moment, she thought he wouldn't listen. Then his eyes found hers, and something in her voice, or maybe her battered face, reached through the red haze of his anger. He dropped Hayes, who slumped to the floor, gasping. "Sheriff!" Nathaniel roared. "In here!" Then he was gathering Clara into his arms, his touch gentle despite the violence still thrumming through him. "Are you hurt?" "Clara, talk to me." "I'm all right," she whispered, though her throat felt crushed and her whole body shook. "I'm all right. We're all right." He pulled her closer, and she felt his heart hammering, felt the tremor in his muscles from adrenaline and fear. "When I saw him on you, I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you before I ever really had you." "You have me," Clara said fiercely, pulling back to look into his face. "You have all of me, Nathaniel Cross, every scared, broken, healing piece." Sheriff Morrison entered with 2 deputies, surveying the destruction with weary eyes. "That's the last of them. 2 dead, 4 captured, including this one." He nudged Hayes with his boot. "I'll make sure he hangs this time." As Morrison hauled Hayes away, the other ranch hands began filtering in, checking for injuries, their faces showing the relief of survival. Old Joe had a graze on his arm, and young Danny was nursing a bruised jaw. but everyone had made it through. "You all fought well," Nathaniel told them, his voice carrying the weight of leadership and gratitude. "Take the day to rest. We'll assess damages tomorrow." As the men dispersed, Nathaniel led Clara upstairs, his hand never leaving hers. In his bedroom, he lit the lamp and gently examined her throat, his face darkening at the bruises already forming. "I should have been there," he said roughly. "Should have protected you better." "You did protect me." Clara caught his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "But I also protected myself. Nathaniel, for the first time in my life, I fought back. I chose to stand my ground. Do you understand what a gift that is?" His thumb traced her cheekbone, careful of the bruises. "You're the bravest person I know. I learned it from you." She turned her face to press a kiss to his palm. "You showed me what it means to be strong without being cruel, to be protective without being possessive, to be a man worthy of respect." Clara. Her name was a prayer on his lips. "Will you marry me? Not because you need protection or employment, but because you want to, because we choose each other." "Yes." The word came without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you. 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then, and it was different from before. Not just desire or comfort, but celebration. A kiss that tasted like survival and promise and the beginning of something neither had dared to hope for. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "We should rest," Nathaniel said, though his eyes suggested rest was the last thing on his mind. "We should," Clara agreed, making no move to leave. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her face up to his. The moment stretched between them, heavy with promise. Then his lips found hers again, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble. This man, this impossible, wonderful man, had given her back her courage, had shown her that love didn't have to mean surrender. "Please stop," she gasped as his kisses trailed down her throat, making her dizzy with sensations she'd never experienced before. Every nerve ending seemed to spark to life under his touch. Nathaniel pulled back immediately, concern flooding his eyes. "Did I hurt you? Your neck?" "No." She gripped his shirt, pulling him back. "No, you didn't hurt me. It's just this fire between us. It's overwhelming." His expression softened into something tender and heated at once. He cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes holding hers. "Only if you swear you don't feel the same fire I do," he murmured. "Because, Clara, you've set me ablaze from the moment I met you." "I do feel it," she whispered. "That's what terrifies me. I've never felt anything like this before." "Neither have I." His forehead touched hers. "Not even with Sarah, and I thought I'd loved her. But this, what I feel for you, it's like comparing a candle to a wildfire." They stayed there, wrapped in each other, as the dawn light began to paint the sky outside. There would be time later for passion, for exploring this fire that burned between them. For now, it was enough to hold each other, to marvel at their survival, to begin imagining a future neither had believed possible. 3 weeks later, Clara stood in the simple wooden church in Redemption Creek, wearing a dress of cream-colored silk that Nathaniel had insisted on ordering from San Francisco. Old Joe had walked her down the aisle, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. The other ranch hands filled the pews, along with what seemed like half the territory. Word had spread about the siege, about the woman who'd fought back, about the rancher who'd found love again. The preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Williams, smiled at them both as they joined hands before the altar. "Dearly beloved." Clara barely heard the words. All her attention was on Nathaniel, resplendent in a black suit that made his gray eyes seem to glow. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world, like she hung the moon and stars. "Do you, Nathaniel James Cross, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice rang clear and certain through the church. "Before God and everyone here, I do." "And do you, Clara Elizabeth Bennet, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. "I do. I absolutely do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Nathaniel didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her with such passion and tenderness that the congregation erupted into cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "Mrs. Cross," Nathaniel murmured against her lips. "Mr. Cross," she replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The celebration afterward was the stuff of legend. Tables groaned with food, a fiddle player provided music, and Nathaniel danced with his bride under the stars, while the entire territory looked on approvingly. Old Joe gave a rambling, sentimental toast that had everyone laughing and crying. Danny caught the garter and turned redder than a summer sunset. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Nathaniel swept Clara into his arms, despite her laughing protests. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my wife over the threshold. It's tradition." He grinned down at her. "Besides, I've been wanting to do this since that first night I brought you here." He carried her through the house they'd already made into a home, up the stairs to the bedroom that was now theirs. Setting her down gently, he cupped her face in his hands. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Clara answered honestly. "You gave me back my life, Nathaniel. You helped me find myself again." "You did that yourself, sweetheart. I just reminded you who you were." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "My brave, beautiful Clara." "Take me to bed, husband," she whispered against his mouth. "I want to start our forever." And he did, slowly and sweetly, teaching her that love could be tender as well as passionate. That desire could be respectful and consuming all at once. They discovered each other through the night, building memories that would sustain them through all the years to come. 5 years later, Clara Cross sat on the porch of the Double Creek Ranch, watching her husband work with a young colt in the training pen. Beside her, 4-year-old Sarah, named for the woman Nathaniel had loved and lost, chattered about the kittens that had been born in the barn. On Clara's lap, 2-year-old James dozed in the afternoon sun. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Nathaniel's reputation for fair dealing and quality stock had spread throughout the territory, and they'd expanded into horse breeding with considerable success. Clara had started a school on the property, teaching the ranch hands' children and any other youngsters whose families wanted education. But more than prosperity, they'd found peace. The kind of deep contentment that came from choosing each other every day, from building something lasting together, from weathering storms and celebrating triumphs as partners in every sense of the word. Nathaniel looked up from the colt and caught her watching. Even across the distance, she felt the force of his love, steady, passionate, enduring. He grinned and touched his hat brim in a mock salute that made her laugh. "Mama, why are you crying?" Sarah asked, studying her with those serious gray eyes she'd inherited from her father. Clara wiped at tears, she hadn't realized were falling. "I'm just happy, sweetheart. Sometimes people cry when they're very, very happy." "That's silly," Sarah declared, but she snuggled closer anyway. Nathaniel finished with the colt and headed toward the house, his stride still confident and strong, despite the silver that had begun threading through his dark hair. He took the porch steps 2 at a time and leaned down to kiss Clara thoroughly, making Sarah giggle. "Gross," their daughter proclaimed, even as she clearly delighted in seeing her parents' affection. "Go check on those kittens you're so worried about," Nathaniel told her with a grin. "Your mother and I need to talk." Sarah scampered off, and Nathaniel carefully took James from Clara's lap, settling the sleeping boy on his shoulder with the practiced ease of an experienced father. Then he pulled Clara to her feet and into his arms. "What did you want to talk about?" she asked, leaning into his warmth. "Nothing in particular. Just wanted to hold my wife." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Still can't quite believe you're real sometimes, that this life is real. I know the feeling." Clara looked out over the land they'd built together, the children they'd made, the future they were creating day by day. "Sometimes I think about that desperate girl who walked into a saloon, ready to trade her last possession for a meal. She seems like a different person now." "She was the same person," Nathaniel said firmly. "Just hadn't found her courage yet, hadn't found her home." "Home," Clara echoed softly, savoring the word. After all her running, all her fear, she'd finally found the place and the person who made that word mean something. "Yes, I'm home." "We're home," Nathaniel corrected, pulling her closer. "Together." "Together," she agreed. The word they'd made into a promise, into a vow that sustained them through every trial. As the sun set over the Montana Territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathaniel and Clara Cross stood wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they'd fought for and the love they'd chosen. And if sometimes they still felt the echoes of old pain, old fear, they faced it together, two wounded souls who'd found healing in each other's strength. The fire that had sparked between them that first night had never dimmed. It had only grown stronger, steadier, warming them through the coldest nights and lighting their way through the darkest times. And it would burn on, a beacon of hope and love, and choosing each other, day after day after day. 6 months into marriage, the spring rain hammered against the windows of the Double Creek Ranch, turning the world outside into a gray blur. Clara stood at the kitchen window, her hands pressed against the cool glass, watching the storm transform the yard into a sea of mud. Behind her, she could hear Nathaniel moving through the house, his boots tracking dirt despite his best efforts. "Clara?" His voice held a note of concern. "You've been standing there for 20 minutes." She turned to face him, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just watching the rain." But Nathaniel knew her too well now. He crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "What's wrong? And don't say nothing. I can see it in your face." Clara hesitated. Then the words tumbled out. "I'm not pregnant." The statement hung between them, heavy with disappointment. They'd been married 6 months, and Clara had begun to hope, to expect even, that she'd be with child by now. But her monthly courses had come that morning, punctual and devastating. Nathaniel's expression softened. "Sweetheart, I know what you're going to say." Clara pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "That it takes time, that we shouldn't worry, that these things happen when they're meant to." "But Nathaniel, what if I can't? What if my marriage to Thomas broke something in me that can't be fixed?" "Hey." He caught her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. Listen to me. I didn't marry you to get children, Clara. I married you because I love you. Because you're my partner, my best friend, my heart. If we have children, that's a blessing. If we don't, we'll still have each other, and that's enough. Is it? Tears spilled down her cheeks. You should have children, Nathaniel. Heirs for this ranch, for everything your parents built. I see how you are with the ranch hands, kids. You'd be an amazing father, and I'm failing you. You're not failing anyone. His voice turned fierce. Clara Cross, you listen to me right now. You are not broken. You are not failing. And you are more than enough, with or without children. Do you hear me? She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But the fear had been building for weeks, fed by well-meaning comments from women in town about when they'd hear the patter of little feet, by the growing awareness of her own body's rhythms and rebellions. I hear you, she whispered. But believing it is harder. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, and Clara buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of leather and rain and home. They stood there as the storm raged outside, holding each other against doubts and disappointments. Tell you what, Nathaniel said after a long moment. Doc Henderson is coming through town next week for his monthly rounds. Why don't we talk to him? Not because I think anything's wrong, but because maybe it'll ease your mind. Clara nodded against his chest. All right, yes, that's a good idea. The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable silence. Clara threw herself into housework with unusual intensity, scrubbing floors and beating rugs as if physical labor could drive out the ache in her chest. Nathaniel tried to help, but she waved him away, needing the distraction of work. That evening, as they lay in bed, Nathaniel reached for her hand in the darkness. I love you, Clara, no matter what. I love you too, she replied, squeezing his fingers. But inside, the fear continued to whisper its poison. What if love isn't enough? The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Clara found herself watching the calendar obsessively, counting down to Doc Henderson's arrival. She tried to hide her anxiety from Nathaniel, but he knew. She could see it in the way he watched her, in the extra tenderness of his touches, in the careful neutrality of his voice when discussing anything related to family. The ranch hands noticed something was wrong, too. Old Joe started leaving wildflowers on the kitchen windowsill. Danny went out of his way to make her laugh with elaborate stories of his latest mishaps. Even the usually gruff foreman, Pete, offered awkward words of comfort about how these things sort themselves out in time. Their kindness only made Clara feel worse. She'd become part of this ranch family, had carved out a place for herself among these rough but good-hearted men. And now she felt like she was failing them all. On the morning Doc Henderson was due to arrive, Clara woke to find Nathaniel already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed and watching her with troubled eyes. Couldn't sleep? She asked, pushing herself upright. Kept thinking about yesterday, he admitted. About how you barely ate dinner. About how you've been pushing yourself so hard all week. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Clara, whatever Doc Henderson says today, it doesn't change anything between us. You understand that, right? I'm trying to, she said honestly. Try harder. His smile was gentle, but his eyes were serious. Because you're scaring me, sweetheart. Not because I'm worried about babies. I'm worried about you, about what this is doing to you. Clara's throat tightened. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. Don't apologize. He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. Just promise me that no matter what happens, you'll talk to me. Really talk. Not just say what you think I want to hear. I promise, Clara whispered against his neck. Doc Henderson arrived mid-morning, his wagon rattling into the yard with its usual collection of medical supplies and remedies. He was a stout man in his 60s, with kind eyes and gentle hands, beloved throughout the territory for his compassion as much as his skill. "Mrs. Cross," he greeted warmly, accepting the coffee Clara offered. "Mr. Cross, what seems to be the trouble?" Clara felt her cheeks flame as she tried to explain her concerns. The words came haltingly, embarrassment warring with desperation. Nathaniel sat beside her, his hand firm and steady on her back. Doc Henderson listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When Clara finished, he nodded slowly. "Well now, 6 months isn't particularly long in the grand scheme of things," he said. "But I understand your concern, especially given your previous marriage. Let's have a proper examination, shall we? Mr. Cross, if you'll wait outside." The examination was thorough and mortifying. Doc Henderson asked questions Clara had never discussed with anyone, poked and prodded with professional detachment. Finally, he helped her sit up, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Cross, I'm going to be honest with you. There's nothing wrong that I can detect. Your previous marriage, you mentioned your husband was considerably older and in poor health toward the end." Clara nodded. "He died of consumption. He'd been sick for nearly 2 years before his death. It's quite possible the problem wasn't with you at all," Doc Henderson said gently. "Illness affects a man's fertility just as surely as it affects everything else. Combined with age, well, the odds were stacked against conception in that situation." Hope fluttered in Clara's chest, fragile and afraid to take flight. "So you think, I think you and that strapping husband of yours are perfectly healthy young people, and nature will take its course when it's ready." He smiled kindly. "But I also think you're working yourself into a state that won't help matters. Stress can affect these things, you know. Best thing you can do is stop worrying, enjoy your marriage, and let things happen naturally." "That's easier said than done," Clara admitted. "I know, but Mrs. Cross, may I call you Clara?" At her nod, he continued. "Clara, I've delivered more babies than I can count in this territory. And I'll tell you something I've learned. The couples who are happiest aren't necessarily the ones who conceive the fastest. They're the ones who remember to love each other through the waiting. Don't let this desire for a child steal the joy from your marriage." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you." After he left, Clara found Nathaniel pacing the front porch like a caged animal. He spun toward her as she emerged, his face taut with worry. "Well, he says there's nothing wrong with me." The relief in her voice was palpable. He thinks maybe Thomas was the one who couldn't have children, not me." The tension drained from Nathaniel's shoulders. He crossed to her in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "I told you," he said fiercely. "I told you that you weren't broken." Clara laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and genuine. "You did. I should have listened." "You should always listen to me," he teased, setting her down but keeping her close. "I'm very wise." "Oh, is that so?" She arched an eyebrow. "Extremely wise." He grinned. "For instance, I'm wise enough to know that my wife has been working herself half to death this week and needs a break. What do you say we take a ride out to the creek? Just the 2 of us. No ranch duties, no worries." "That sounds perfect," Clara said, meaning it. They saddled horses and rode out under a sky finally cleared of rain, the world washed clean and smelling of sage and wet earth. At the creek, they spread a blanket and lay side by side, watching clouds drift overhead. "I'm sorry I let fear get the better of me this week," Clara said softly. "I know you said it didn't matter, but I couldn't stop thinking about disappointing you." "You could never disappoint me." Nathaniel rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "Clara, when I married you, I didn't have a checklist of requirements. I just knew I wanted to spend every day for the rest of my life with you. Everything else is just extra. Even children?" "Even children." He traced the curve of her cheek with one finger. "Though I'll admit the thought of a little girl with your courage or a little boy with your kindness, that's a beautiful dream. But it's not the only dream I have. I dream of growing old with you, of building this ranch into something even better, of sitting on that porch when we're gray and remembering all the adventures we had. Those dreams are just as important." Clara pulled him down for a kiss, pouring into it all the love and gratitude she couldn't find words for. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Take me home, husband," she whispered. "I want to work on making those dreams come true." The ride back was charged with anticipation. As soon as they reached the house, Nathaniel swept Clara into his arms and carried her upstairs, both of them laughing like teenagers. This time, their lovemaking was different. Less desperate, more joyful. A celebration of each other, rather than a mission to conceive. Afterwards, tangled together in the fading afternoon light, Clara felt something shift inside her. The fear that had gripped her for weeks finally loosened its hold. Maybe they would have children. Maybe they wouldn't. But either way, they had this love, this partnership, this home they'd built together. "I love you," she murmured against Nathaniel's chest. "I love you too, sweetheart." His arms tightened around her. Always. 1 year later, Clara Cross stirred the pot of stew simmering on the stove, one hand absently rubbing the small of her back. At 7 months pregnant, she'd finally had to accept that her days of easily managing all the household duties were behind her, at least temporarily. "You should be resting," old Joe grumbled from the doorway, where he'd appointed himself her unofficial guardian. "Boss said you're supposed to take it easy." "The boss can mind his own business," Clara replied with a grin, even as she accepted the chair Joe pulled out for her. "But I suppose I can sit while this finishes cooking." The pregnancy had come as a surprise, a wonderful, terrifying surprise that had sent Nathaniel into a panic of joy and worry. After they'd stopped obsessing over it, after they'd simply let themselves enjoy their marriage, Clara had missed her monthly course, then missed another. By the time Doc Henderson confirmed what she'd already suspected, she'd been 3 months along. Nathaniel had cried when she told him. Actually cried, tears streaming down his weathered face as he dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat belly. "Hello in there," he'd whispered. "This is your papa. I already love you more than I thought possible." Now, with just 2 months to go, Nathaniel had become impossibly protective. He'd insisted on hiring a woman from town, Mrs. Patterson, to help with the heavier housework. He'd forbidden Clara from lifting anything heavier than a teacup, an edict she cheerfully ignored when he wasn't looking. And he'd taken to following her around with a worried expression, as if she might break at any moment. "It's sweet, really," Clara had told Doc Henderson during her last checkup. "But if he asks me one more time if I'm feeling all right, I might strangle him." Doc Henderson had laughed. "First-time fathers are always the worst. He'll calm down once the baby's actually here." Now, sitting in her kitchen, with old Joe hovering nearby, Clara felt the baby kick hard against her ribs. She gasped, her hand flying to the spot. "You all right?" Joe was instantly alert. "Fine. Just a strong kick." Clara smiled, rubbing the spot. "This one's going to be a handful, I can tell. Like mother, like child," Joe said with a grin. The sound of horses in the yard drew their attention. Through the window, Clara could see Nathaniel and several of the hands returning from checking the northern fence line. Even at a distance, she could see the moment Nathaniel spotted her through the window. His entire body seemed to relax, as if he'd been holding tension until he could verify she was safe. He burst through the door moments later, his eyes immediately finding her. "Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Clara assured him, even as her heart warmed at his concern. "The baby's been active today, but Doc said that's normal." Nathaniel crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair and pressing his hand to her swollen belly. As if on cue, the baby kicked against his palm. His face lit up with wonder, the same expression he wore every time he felt their child move. "Strong," he murmured. "Going to be a fighter, this one." "Just like their mother," Clara said, echoing Joe's earlier comment. "God help me," Nathaniel groaned dramatically. "One of you is hard enough to handle." Clara swatted his shoulder, laughing. "You love it." "I do," he admitted, rising to press a kiss to her forehead. "I really, really do." That night, as they prepared for bed, Nathaniel helped Clara out of her dress, a task that had become increasingly difficult as her belly expanded. His hands were gentle, reverent, tracing the curve of her body with obvious appreciation. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "I'm enormous," Clara corrected, but she was smiling. "Enormously beautiful." He guided her to the bed, helping her settle against the pillows he'd arranged to support her back. "Carrying our child, creating a whole new person. That's not just beautiful, Clara. It's miraculous." She caught his hand, pressing it to the side of her belly where the baby seemed to be pressing back. "Talk to them. They always settle when they hear your voice." Nathaniel stretched out beside her, his mouth close to her rounded stomach. "Hey there, little one. It's Papa again. Your mama and I can't wait to meet you. We've got your room all ready. Mama made the curtains herself, even though I told her she should rest. She's stubborn like that. You're going to love her." The baby shifted, then gradually stilled, soothed by the rumble of Nathaniel's voice. Clara ran her fingers through his hair, marveling at how completely their lives had transformed. A little over 2 years ago, she'd been desperate and alone, trading her last possession for a meal. Now she was here, carrying the child of the man she loved, surrounded by family. Not just the one growing inside her, but the one they'd built together on this ranch. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel asked, looking up at her. "That I'm happy," Clara said simply. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be. Even with the backaches and the swollen ankles and the fact that I can't see my own feet anymore." "I can see your feet," Nathaniel offered helpfully. "They're very nice feet, a little swollen, but nice." Clara laughed, the sound free and unguarded. "You're ridiculous. You love it," he shot back, using her earlier words. "I do," she admitted. "I really, really do." 2 months later, on a warm July evening, Clara's water broke during supper. She was ladling stew into bowls when she felt the gush of fluid, looked down at the puddle forming on the kitchen floor, and announced calmly, "Nathaniel, I think it's time." The calm lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then Nathaniel went pale, dropped his spoon with a clatter, and started shouting for someone, anyone, to ride for Doc Henderson immediately. "Nathaniel," Clara caught his arm as he tried to rush past her. "Breathe. We have time. Time? We need... He couldn't seem to form complete sentences. Mrs. Patterson, Clara called, much more composed than the father-to-be. Could you come help me upstairs? The next several hours were a blur of pain and exhaustion. Mrs. Patterson and Doc Henderson moved around the bedroom with practiced efficiency, while Nathaniel paced outside the door like a caged animal. Clara could hear him through the wall, muttering prayers and promises, and occasionally demanding updates. You could let him in, Doc Henderson suggested during a quiet moment. Some husbands like to be present. And some husbands would pass out cold, Mrs. Patterson said dryly. Clara would have laughed if another contraction hadn't seized her at that moment. She gritted her teeth, bearing down as Doc Henderson had instructed, feeling like her body was trying to tear itself apart. That's it, Clara, Doc encouraged. You're doing wonderfully. Just a bit more. Time became meaningless, measured only in waves of pain and brief respites. Clara lost track of how long she'd been laboring when Doc Henderson's voice suddenly changed, becoming urgent. Next contraction, Clara. Give me everything you've got. She bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed, a scream tearing from her throat. Then suddenly, impossibly, the pressure released and a new sound filled the room, the indignant wail of a newborn. It's a girl, Doc Henderson announced, holding up a tiny, squirming, perfect creature. A beautiful, healthy girl. The door burst open and Nathaniel rushed in, his face wild with worry. Clara, is she? She's fine, Doc Henderson said, quickly cleaning the baby and wrapping her in a soft blanket. They're both fine. Come meet your daughter, Mr. Cross. Nathaniel moved as if in a dream, crossing to the bed, where Clara lay exhausted but smiling. Doc Henderson placed the bundled infant in her arms, and Clara looked down into the tiny face of her daughter. Hello, sweet girl, she whispered. We've been waiting for you. The baby had stopped crying, her eyes, gray like her father's, trying to focus on Clara's face. She had a dusting of dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers that gripped Clara's thumb with surprising strength. She's perfect, Nathaniel breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. He reached out with one finger to stroke the baby's cheek with infinite gentleness. Absolutely perfect. She looks like you, Clara said, noting the shape of the baby's chin, the set of her eyes. She's beautiful like you, Nathaniel countered. He looked up, and Clara saw tears streaming unashamedly down his face. Clara, I don't have words. Neither do I, Clara admitted, her own tears falling freely now. Nathaniel, we made a person, a whole entire person. He laughed through his tears, leaning down to press his forehead to hers. We did. We really did. Have you thought about names? Doc Henderson asked as he finished tidying up. Clara and Nathaniel exchanged glances. They'd discussed names endlessly over the past months, but somehow none of their careful choices seemed right now that their daughter was actually here. Hope, Clara said suddenly. I want to name her Hope. Nathaniel's expression softened with understanding. Hope, for the future they'd built together, for the healing they'd both found, for the love that had transformed their lives. Hope Elizabeth Cross, he said, testing out the full name, after your mother, and Sarah for a middle name. Clara added, wanting to honor the woman who'd come before her, whose loss had shaped the man she loved. Hope Sarah Elizabeth Cross. Perfect, Nathaniel whispered. She's absolutely perfect. Later that night, after Doc Henderson and Mrs. Patterson had left with instructions for Clara's recovery, after the ranch hands had tiptoed in one by one to meet the new addition, after Hope had been fed and changed and was sleeping peacefully in the cradle Nathaniel's father had carved years ago, Clara and Nathaniel finally had a moment alone. Nathaniel sat beside the bed, holding Clara's hand, his eyes constantly drifting to the cradle where their daughter slept. "I never thought I could feel this way again," he admitted quietly. "After Sarah died, I thought that part of my heart was just closed, locked away forever." "And now?" Clara asked, squeezing his fingers. "Now I realize it wasn't closed, just waiting." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Waiting for you, waiting for this." Clara felt fresh tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. "I love you, Nathaniel Cross. Thank you for giving me this life, for giving me our daughter, for giving me a reason to hope again." "I love you too, Clara Cross." He leaned forward to kiss her softly. "Thank you for being brave enough to walk into that saloon 2 years ago, for being strong enough to choose me, to choose us, to choose this life." "Best decision I ever made," Clara murmured sleepily, exhaustion finally claiming her. As she drifted off, she heard Nathaniel move to the cradle, heard the soft creak of wood as he lifted their daughter into his arms. His voice, low and tender, filtered through her consciousness. "Welcome to the world, Hope Sarah Elizabeth Cross. Your mama and I are going to love you so much. We're going to teach you to be strong and kind and brave. We're going to show you how to ride and shoot and read. But most of all, we're going to teach you that you're worthy of love, not because of what you do or what you provide, but simply because of who you are. That's the gift your mama gave me, and it's the gift we'll give you." Clara smiled in her sleep, her heart full to bursting. They'd come so far, she and Nathaniel, from desperate strangers to partners to parents. The road hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. And now they had hope, a living symbol of everything they'd overcome and everything they'd built together. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. Together, Clara thought drowsily, always together. The fire that had sparked between them in that saloon so long ago burned steady and true, warming their home and lighting the way forward, and it always would. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Clara and Nathaniel's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.